Yeah, well, because I just finished up my home office finally. I just put the handles up, and since I moved to my new house 6 months ago, I was really trying to just like slim down shit, and so I had this bin of stuff, and I was like, let me go through it, let's see what I need, and I had like a picture of my brother who passed away like 5 years ago, so I was like, oh, cool, I'll keep that, and I was going through some other stuff, and I found the yearbooks, and I was like, do I really want to keep these?
Yeah.
And I was like, I have my like diploma for high school, and I was like, yeah, you know what? We'll keep these couple things, and then I just tossed a bunch of other shit out because I was like, I don't need any of this stuff. Someone told me a long time ago. I think it was after my brother passed because I was trying to figure out, like, how do you like keep a memory of somebody, or like, what do you keep of somebody? Because you know, like some people, like, say their wife dies and they keep like all their clothes and shit like that. I'm like, well, I don't want any of this shit. Like,
Yeah.
My brother's was cool and stuff, and I want to remember it, but I don't need like his fucking clothes. Like, this is weird. So I kept a picture, and I have 2 pictures. Is what it is. And things that just like remember, type of thing. But I just got rid of everything else. Yep, just realized I'm doing that. That's gonna be loud and annoying. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I definitely just keep the small things, right? So like my grandparents are getting old.
Yep.
My grandfather just passed away last year.
Sorry to hear that.
But like my thing, Thanksgiving was my grandmother always made homemade mashed potatoes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So now they're cleaning out the house. They have all this stuff to get rid of and give away. And I didn't really want much of any of it. But my mom found the handwritten recipe.
Oh, that's
and so all the kind of stuff that's sentimental, if you will, to me, I keep in a cigar box.
Oh, that's cool.
So I have very few things.
Yeah,
but
it's nice though. You can go back and
right.
look at it and remember. It just gives kind of a perspective on life.
My grandma used to make chocolate oatmeal cookies. Same
Oof.
thing, handwritten, like exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's one of the.
They don't do it like that anymore. I feel like whenever you look at a recipe now, it's like all the ads. Have you ever looked up a recipe online? It's like, where's the instructions? Where's the? You gotta sit there and scroll for 10 minutes, and then you open it. Your screen goes black while you're doing something, and you open it back up, and you gotta scroll all the way through. So
it's like they strategically put it at the bottom.
Yeah.
The article.
Yeah.
But they always have that jump to the recipe button that you click, and then it's like add.
Yeah.
I found a way around that. So what I do is I go to the recipe, and then I click print, and then I just print it to a PDF. So I have a whole folder on my computer now of all like the recipes and things that I've made.
Oh well, that's
that
cool.
way I don't have to go try to find it. I do it all through Pinterest too, and I figured out that little trick because I'm like, oh, this is a cool recipe, and then I would like save it or whatever, and then I'm like, where did I put the recipe? So now I just have it in the folder.
That's smart.
Figure out this shit but I do like the handwritten note stuff. It's funny you guys bring that up because talking about my mom, she still has a cookbook from her mom. That is all handwritten stuff, and she won't get rid of it. She's like, no, it's like, this is the recipe. I was like,
Yeah.
that's cool, Hopefully you pass that down to me. I don't know if I'll ever use it, but
Yeah.
it's just like a cool little thing, Sentimental stuff,
But now all that stuff's sitting in self-storage.
Yeah,
like you're talking
well, and
about.
that's right. That's what's going on now.
Yeah.
So many people like don't throw shit away.
Right.
That's why the self-storage just, industry is blown up
Right.
with it. And we're talking about with data storage, the same thing.
Yeah, right.
Like you're probably seeing that. I know you do ground up development, so like let's take a circle back. Like, tell us a little bit about you, like what you do, how you got into it, your background, and why you do what you do.
Yeah, so I kind of always knew, I wanted to get into commercial real estate. I always told people I was in high school when '08 happened, so I would go around when I was younger saying that, and people looked at me like I was crazy, right, because of what was happening. But I wasn't in it at that point. So the world we live in right now is probably similar as I'm in it. So went to college, went to South Carolina, started interning with a Newmark affiliate out of Columbia there, more on the industrial side actually, and then fast forward, graduated from there. Jumped into industrial brokerage for a little bit, and then actually had a fast food client kind of fall in my lap, if you will. And met some guys at another group, a development group there in Columbia, and they said, "Hey, why don't we, try and help this guy grow and do some build-to-suit and development stuff for them?" And I was probably 2 years out of college. That was new to me, but the ooh and the ah of development is a young college grad, and why not? So I jumped off, I guess. 2-3 years out of school, jumped into development, a group called Diversified Development out of Columbia. We were backed by, our CEO was our equity at the time, and we were doing just single-tenant roll-out prototype development, build-to-suit work. We did a ton of stuff for Popeyes and O'Reilly's and stuff of that nature. So fast forward, I was there for probably 3 or 4 years. Again, the equity was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, older gentleman. I was just starting my career. Wanted to kind of get on a little more aggressive firm, if you will, and keep moving. So then I jumped to a firm out of Winston-Salem, Jim Cap Development, really doing the same thing, single-tenant, merchant, retail development. So I was there for probably 2 years or so, up until I guess last December. A few things happened there, and found myself kind of searching for something new. And I didn't know what that was at the time. The interest rate market, and we can delve into that later, really, really hurt the single-tenant merchant development world. When you're building on skinny margins, cap rates are directly, reflective of interest rates, and it takes 2 years to do a project, and, you're building it on, 1.5, 2 point spread, and interest rates move up significantly more than that. So now you deliver a product that, you're almost basically upside down in.
Yeah. Question.
So, yeah.
Single tenant merchant retail, for people that don't know.
Yeah.
Explain that like we're 12 years old.
Yeah, so a single tenant merchant development basically means that we don't really hold any of our assets. So what we're doing is it's a build to suit model. So call it any franchisee or Starbucks or Walgreens or what have you in the single tenant retail space comes to us. Hey, we like this site. Would you build it for us? Turnkey build to suit. So we buy the site, we take the site down, we build the real estate and lease it back to them on usually 15, 20-year lease. We sell that asset probably, or take it to market at least 30 days before CO a lot of times. So a merchant is more or less, not to dig too deep here, but you don't hold the asset. So there's kind of different scenarios, right? You got guys here in town that have, are holding companies. They've owned assets for 20, 30 years. You have, there's a model out there that's a 3 to 5 year value add, so it's almost like flipping a home, I guess, in you guys' world. So you buy something, you put lipstick on it, if you will, you juice the rent or lease rate and get back out of it. But merchant development is simply, it's a lot of a quantity game. It's skinny margins, build, sell, build, sell, build, sell. Think of, like a lot of your bigger home builders, I guess, if you will. So obviously there's guys out there who have portfolios of 10 or 20 homes, and there's also, your builder that's rolling. So kind of long and short what that entails.
Might be a dumb question. How are you landing, or the company landing, those deals like Starbucks? I mean, you threw around some big names. Like, how are you guys connected with them? Like, when did that happen? And I mean, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get there? How do you don't start
it's
there?
probably like
right.
For people, right, that want to get in development. They're like, I want to land this client, but how do you?
So a lot of it, people that you guys probably call on buyers and sellers all the time. Kind of in our world, a lot of people we're calling on, a lot of times are tenant rep brokers. So in our world, you have a landlord broker, tenant broker. So you got guys out there who represent, call it Starbucks, Walgreens, Chipotle, whoever it may be. So a lot of the times I'm calling on those guys, hey, read an article, Chipotle's growing like crazy. Where do they want to be? Hey, they want to be in Clayton, North Carolina, or wherever it is. And then, then I do what I do and go and find sites. So it's kind of 50-50. So you have a component of finding relationships there. And then also finding just good dirt, really. Everything that we do is probably 3 acres or less. 90% of it's probably an acre. It's what we call a pad site. So a pad site meaning, you have your grocery anchored center and you have everything out front, out parcels. And everything we look for from, what's the access like? Is there a median on the main road? Is it right in, right out? Can you take a left in the site? Is it at a light? A lot of retailers like to see 15 or 20,000 or more cars a day on the main thoroughfare. So back to what I'm saying is if it's a very good site and has great dynamics, then a lot of the times we will tie that up and then go pitch it to the retailers. So it's kind of 50-50. Some of it is, getting insight and intel on, growth. All these retailers have heat maps or pinpoints. Hey, here's a map of Charlotte. We want to go here, here, here. Some of it's that. Some of it's just very good real estate that we trust and think that somebody would take a shot at, so we'll tie it up and then float it out there.
Yeah. Is a lot of your day to day just driving out to sites?
Yes.
Seeing them in person?
Yeah, right. A lot of it, the guy that I used to work for, it's just very old school guy. He hated Google Earth. He was like, I'm not putting a site under contract until you go drive it.
Yep.
Because it's a lot of there's so much. I mean, you look at like the Dunkin' Donuts and the Starbucks of the world. There's always an AM and a PM side of the road, right? So you take South Boulevard for instance. I mean, there's a I would say, what's that? The eastern side of the road going into town, into work. That's probably where your Dunkin' and your this and that are.
Bagels.
Right. Exactly. See, so you see kind of.
Never thought about that.
Right. So there's always an AM, always an AM and a PM side of the road. So your PM side of the road may be more of your fast casual guys, your Outbacks of the world and so on and so forth, or a lot of your fast food guys, mom coming home from work to pick up a bucket of chicken or
So
whatever.
grocery stores are most likely on the PM side. Like something like that.
Most likely.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of South Boulevard as we're talking about. Like Publix is on the right side. There's on the PM side. Lowe's is on the AM side. That's totally. Well, that actually makes sense. So,
Yeah, and some of it, just digging into site-specific stuff.
Yeah.
You have, a destination retailer, and then, another retailer that you. I'm trying to use examples here. So, like, you see Aspen Dental. So, you're not just driving down South Boulevard going, I need to go to the dentist. So that's more of a destination retailer. So sometimes they don't really mind too much on AM, PM, so on and so forth. Whereas gas stations, certainly, you're driving down the road, well, I need gas. So you pull in. And a lot of guys look at speed limits. If the speed limit is 55, you're more likely just to, hey, I'll catch the next gas station. If it's 35, you're like, okay, I can spend some time. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into looking at a site.
And do a lot of these companies have their own set requirements already? Like when you're talking with Starbucks, like, hey, this is we want to be in these areas, but here's also the other requirements, but traffic, speed, stuff like that.
Yep. And they usually, so you can go to ICSC. I don't know if you guys know what ICSC is. ICSC is International Council of Shopping Centers. So they have conferences all throughout the country, and they have the massive one in Vegas once a year, and they have one in Charlotte, Atlanta, kind of breakout sessions. Elsewhere, essentially what it is it's a conference of a big room of all retailers. So you can, if you have, let's say I got a great site at 485 and South Boulevard, and I go into this conference and all the tables and booths are lined up, and hey, Panda Express, what do you think about this site? Hey, Chipotle, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And what I'm getting at is at those booths, everybody has essentially a flyer that has site requirements. So it has, here's our prototype. We need, for our site plan, we need 135 feet of frontage. We need 210 feet of depth. And if I find a site that's only got 115 frontage, it's like, well, darn, that's not going to work for O'Reilly's. They like the site, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
And they have the traffic counts and the, a lot of the sit down guys like, certain big box. So like your Outback wants to be next to your Home Depot or your Lowe's, and like a lot of these guys feed off of each other. So.
And I heard this a long time ago. Tell me how correct this is. Burger King follows McDonald's. So any place McDonald's gets a location, they just basically put one across the street.
Yeah.
So they kind of go basically, well, they've already done all the research. We know it's going to be a good spot, so they'll just go across the street.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see a lot of other retailers do that, or just like just in the space?
Yeah, certainly. People do that all the time. I mean, a good example would be like even in the Target or Walmart world. Like usually where there's a Target, there's a Walmart. Or
Chick-fil-A is what I'm thinking.
Everybody in our world chases Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, that's hard.
And it's tough. And I think they all know that they won't be Chick-fil-A. I think, and this is just my thought, a lot of them, if you go by Chick-fil-A and the line's way down the road and you got kids screaming in the back and so on and so forth, well, what's the next greatest thing?
Yep.
So I feel like there's some dynamics there. Chick-fil-A, obviously, they're like the the end all be all.
Yeah, well, it's great for those places too because they're closed on Sundays, so they know they're getting all the traffic on Sundays.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
It's funny to think about the psychology of it. Like you said, it's like if you got kids in the back, like you're not going to want to stop at Chick-fil-A. But there's also the flip side to it. If you're, say, with your significant other, it's like you see the lines, like, okay, this must be good. We got to jump in line. And it's crazy how you see some of these Chick-fil-A's. Like I know the one in Mooresville did it. The one on Randolph just did it, where they tore down it after they were super successful and they reconfigured it so they can get more people in there.
Yep.
So they literally took 6 months, 8 months, lost all the revenue, but they knew, well, if we just add these lines, like the one in Mooresville added another drive-through line, and the one on Randolph, I think they made the interior smaller so they could get more people in, so less people off the road.
I've seen one where it's like a 4-lane and there is no inside. It's like elevated and they got 4 drive-through lanes. And all they do is to go.
That's a brand new one they just did in Atlanta, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah, they just it's wild looking. But yeah, it's crazy too how, I would assume that this is kind of a COVID thing, but when I was just starting out in the business, Chick-fil-A was only crowded with dual drive-through, 2 drive-through lanes, and now it's all these fast food guys are getting smaller and adding a lot more drive-through.
I've seen Chick-fil-A do the mobile to go as well.
Yep.
Not only you get drive-through, but it's a dedicated lane. I went through a couple days ago, and it was just mobile orders. So it's not even you order there. It's like they're forcing you to go through the app.
Yeah.
So it's interesting where it's going.
We've seen that with a lot of other ones. Like I went to McDonald's a while back, but one of the things they ask you when you're like, "Hey, did you use the mobile app?" So they're priming you, right? Because they understand, like, okay, if we can cut out this process, we can get more people in here.
Right.
So that was interesting the way.
And there's probably some data behind upsells and things on the app,
I mean, it's like when you're grocery shopping on the app, right? I grocery shop on Instacart.
you might also want this.
Yeah, I'm like, you know what? I do want that. You're right.
Ice cream sounds.
I always get the cookie at the the DoorDash on Chick-fil-A. That sounds good.
Yeah, what's $1?
Yeah, right. But what's really fascinating, did you know, and somebody's probably going to fact check me on this, that Chick-fil-A, I believe, has one of the slowest drive-through times out of all fast food.
No.
Because the drive-through line's long, but they have multiple points of where they're touching you, if you will. So you drive up, the guy takes your order or whatever, and then you sit in line, and then, somebody else is at the window, so on and so forth. So if you sit there and actually clock it and then go drive through another drive-through, it's crazy, like the way that they're thinking and their model, it's all
well, they keep you engaged
faster.
all the time, right? You don't
engaged,
feel like,
that's the word,
because as you were saying that, I was thinking about it, yeah, that's right, because they have the person that takes your order, then you move up and you pay for the order, and then you move up, and then you get the order.
Yep.
And there's even someone before you get the order sometimes like, hey, are you Josh?
Verifying.
Yeah.
So they have all these checks and balances, which is nice because I've never gotten Chick-fil-A and had my order screwed up.
Yeah.
Because there's all this stuff. But I'm interacting with someone the whole time, so I don't feel like it's long.
Right.
And it's a culture thing. Everybody's generally nice. Where some of these other places you go and it's like, I think you might have spit in my food.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty sure you might have just spit in my food.
Yeah, it's...
That's a cool little
different. It's crazy. So yeah, a little delve in the fast food world. But
Chick-fil-A to roll out your My Pleasure. You know how long it took them to get all the locations to do it?
What is that?
How long? So when you go, they essentially thank you. They say My Pleasure.
Oh,
everybody.
Right. Oh, okay.
Did you not know that?
I didn't click to me. I just noticed it really nice. Yeah.
Oh,
did you not know that?
I didn't. No, I didn't think about it. I just assumed.
You're just like, man, everybody's really nice around here.
Seriously,
that's on purpose. They say My Pleasure every time. I don't know if it's true, but there's a room that says if they don't say it, you get something for free.
Oh, well, see, now I'm gonna
fact check that.
That's why you know that.
But it took them 5 years. It took them 5 years to implement that. Top down, 5 full years for all the locations and all the employees.
I think that's a culture thing.
Yeah, but geez, how much work and effort did that take? It's one simple thing.
Well, it's hard to measure that too of what it changes, but I don't know if you guys have saw this. There's companies that will actually hire Chick-fil-A to do their culture stuff, like to do training and stuff, because they're so good at it and their culture's so strong.
Yeah,
I mean, they're such a successful company. They literally take a day off of the week and they still are more successful than a lot of these other franchises.
Yeah, their AEVs are ridiculous.
What's that?
But,
What's that specifically?
okay, so
Break it down.
And
For
I know
people
we're
that don't know.
I know we're like diving real deep in the
Yeah.
fast food world.
No,
but,
that's okay.
AUVs is average unit volume.
Okay.
So the way that, and this can kind of, I guess, fade into dynamics of the development process, but average unit volume. So, and again, I'm going to go ahead and say, because I know this is wrong, but it's close.
Okay.
So average unit volume of a Chick-fil-A is probably 3.8 or 4 million.
Okay.
Average unit volume of, a Starbucks is probably 2.
Okay.
It's average of McDonald's, I think, is like 3 million. Anyways, probably 75% of your average unit volumes in the fast food world is anywhere from $1.5 million to $2 million.
Okay.
And Chick-fil-A is just like the complete and utter outlier. But why I say that is when we build for them,
Yep.
we want the franchisee to be healthy, paying us rent. So a lot of guys, whether it's a franchisor, franchisee, us, corporate, whoever, want to make sure that their rent to sales ratio is in check. Around 8%-ish is a good idea, because if they fail, we fail, I guess is really what we like to say, right? So what we do is if, again, I'm just using. Let's say KFC comes to us and goes, "Hey, we want you to build us a store," and the piece of dirt's way overpriced, and it spits out a rent that's like, way above where they should be, then or where their AUV is. I'll go look at KFC's AUV. Let's say it's $1.5 million, and then I'll look at my rent. I'm like, whoa, this is way out of whack. So. That scares us a little bit because obviously going back to merchant development, when we sell it on the back end, a lot of the investors that buy our stuff know that. So when guys go to buy our deals and they say, "Hey, let me look at this guy's sales," and it's like, "Whoa, his rent to sales are way he's going under." So that's
Are you like proactively going to KFC and being like, "Hey, this probably doesn't make sense for your franchise"?
Sometimes it's kind of a hard it's a hard conversation to have. A lot of the franchisees are like, which is great, which we like to see too. They believe in themselves and, "Hey, this is going to be a $3 million store. I can pay you this rent." This kind of worries me. And a lot of people really get it. A lot of people are like, "Hey, I can't make that rent. Let's move on down the road and look at another site."
How fast do those decisions happen? Like, I know in the residential world, things happen like that. And understanding the commercial, it takes a little bit longer, but like someone to make that decision, like, all right, not the right place. Is that like a week? Is that like a day? Or is it like, hey, we've kind of done our due diligence for 3 months and figured out, nothing, this isn't going to square peg round hole type thing?
Yeah, so it all depends in the, in the single tenant or net lease world, if you will. There's, I guess, 2 types of clients or tenants, corporate and franchise, right? And so like Starbucks, there's no franchisees, so you're dealing with corporate. We call it Aspen Dental, you're dealing with corporate. Chase Bank or Fifth Third, corporate. Publix, corporate, whoever. But obviously a lot of fast food guys are franchisees. Franchisees are a lot easier because you're dealing with the franchisee one-on-one. It's me and you working out a deal. A lot of corporate deals take forever because it has to go through a finance department to approve the rent. It has to go through a construction and design department to approve, modifications to the building. It's got to go through the real estate department to approve the location. It's got to, I'm trying to bite my tongue here. It's frustrating sometimes dealing with some of these huge corporate guys, which, again, it's, coming from the residential world, like 120 days in our world is moving pretty fast.
Yeah.
So like on a franchise deal, then talking about due diligence, sorry for those that don't. Because that gives me a few months to work out a lease. It gives me a few months to do my base due diligence, phase 1 geotech survey, so on and so forth. It gives me, call it 6 months to entitle and permit it, and then I can close and I'm going to break ground. A lot of these corporate guys are like thresholds. I mean, you got to get through an LOI with the lease, and then you got to get through the lease, and then they got to approve all your building plans, and then you got to, on a corporate deal, we're at least 240 days before getting everything worked out. So
That's
it's definitely a long timeline.
Under contract fully?
No.
Okay.
Before closing.
Gotcha.
Closing on the dirt.
That's before
on the
you put a
acquisition.
stake in the ground.
Oh yeah, easily.
And by the time you close on it, do you already know, like, you've done the permitting and stuff? Because I think about a couple stories you've told me about some interesting things that have come up during the build process and stuff. I think of a fire hydrant as a we'll get into that in a minute. But once you close, where are you guys at with that? Like, what's that look like?
So, in today's world, 100% permitted, entitled. There's no risk involved. Cool. Going back to a few years ago, a lot of guys were, you had to get aggressive, right? I mean, money was floating around everywhere. It was cheap. You had 5 guys on the same site closing in 30, 60 days. But that was okay because things were rolling. People were doing deals, right? Yeah. So that, and again, I don't kind of forget your question here, but for the most part nowadays, it's fully entitled permit. I mean, we can break ground the day after we close. Because again, what happens, just to allude to your point, I mean, you go close, let's say you got a Starbucks deal going, they want the site, they want it bad, seller wants you to close in 60 days. There's no way you're going to get everything worked out in that. Let's say you go close on the dirt, and next thing you know, Starbucks, something happens with the lease. There's something in the zoning ordinance that doesn't allow it, which we always check. But I could sit here for hours listening out things that could go wrong. And then you're sitting there, you're stuck on a piece of dirt with no tenant, paying debt on it, or an equity investor or whoever, and you got no tenant. Yeah. So that's how people lose their, So we usually, ours are very conservative, I guess is really a word. I mean, we like to have permits, entitlements in hand, so on and so forth.
And do you just have backup tenants like lined up? Let's say that Starbucks deal falls through. It's like, oh crap, this will actually be a good Dunkin' or a Hardee's or whatever.
So again, going back to what we kind of alluded to earlier on looking at sites, we would close quick if it's a good site and there are backup tenants. Again, if somebody showed me something at, out here on South Boulevard in front of the Publix, and I mean, absolutely, why not? Yeah. But then we would close probably without permits and, just basically speculative development, spec development, land banking the deal. But, a lot of, some of the fast food stuff comes into like interstate plays, like it may be a random interstate exit, if you will, but every fast food guy's there. If we go tying up something there and we lose our tenant, then no way we're going to close on some exit halfway between here and, Columbia or whatever you will, because there will be nobody else probably. Yeah. So it kind of, it's a risk you got to take. Yeah. I mean, if the site proves itself and, and if you get it for the right price that you can hold it, pay your equity investor, pay debt on it, so on and so forth. 'Cause then, where it gets sideways is you're overpaying for the dirt, and then you're paying for something without income. Next thing you know, instead of having $1 million in it, you got $1.5 million in it, and then it gets kind of ugly. So it's got to be a pretty good site for us to close on it without.
What's a cool project you're working on right now? About active stuff.
Yeah,
or
is there any
maybe
NDAs
a prior
out there? How does that
one?
work?
Yeah, where's the NDAs?
Diddy party. What?
Yeah, so we don't, use the word cool projects. I've always said, like, what I do is fun and I enjoy it and I love it. But at the end of the day, you're building a single tenant retail. There's really no, I've always said that I really kind of wish, maybe at some point, you look at these guys that do Camp North End and these like cool projects, I guess, if you will. I guess I'm not really sure what you mean by cool, but we.
Yeah, let me kind of rephrase. From an outsider, I don't know much about commercial, but obviously I am a consumer of a lot of the brands that you talk about. Like, it's cool from a consumer perspective with like you're involved, you're help building and selling. Like, it's a whole business in itself. Like, is there? I just think of Charlotte specifically with I mean, there's neighborhoods, blowing up every day. Like Iron District is one that I guess that's probably more residential, probably some commercial in there. I don't know if you dabble in that, but Iron District, there's another place in Charlotte that was like a little sub neighborhood. I'm blanking on the name of it. No, it was.
There's so many of them.
Like Innovation Park or something.
Innovation District. I don't know what that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd never heard of it, and I've lived here for 10 years. But are you involved in any of those kind of up and coming things where it's like, oh, actually this one project is like pretty cool? Like you mentioned, Camp North End's right next to where I'm at. Like that would be so sick to be involved in that.
Yeah. So so to answer your question, no, we've never.
No, nothing cool.
Yeah, we a lot of the people that I've named are guys that we're actively pursuing or working with.
Yeah.
A lot of and this could be a whole nother rabbit hole. A lot of there's zoning galore as far as overlays in different districts, and you look up zoning on a property, and there could be an overlay restricting this and that and this variance, and it's mind-boggling. My point being, a lot of these like arts districts, if you will, some of them like restrict drive-throughs. So, which I completely I make a living off of drive-throughs, but I completely get, right? Like, what good is it going to do to go to NODA or Camp North End and go plop up Popeyes right next to it? I mean, as far as the visual aesthetics or South End, if you will. So we don't really dabble in some of those, adaptive reuse, I guess really is the word, projects, and from what I gather, they're very strenuous as far as tax incentives and historic renovation. It's just, I've always kind of thought I can go do 10 single-tenant deals, or probably more in the amount of time that it takes somebody to go through just the absolute headache to do, those mixed-use projects or some of those. Now, as much as I would love to get on here and talk about how I develop, or redevelop Camp North End, absolutely. But I mean, it's a whole different ball game. Yeah. And a lot of the retail components in those are, like take South End for example. So going back to different overlays and zonings and so on and so forth. All these multifamily guys, you notice they have retail at the first floor. So that's probably something in some sort of zoning, if you will. That's not the retail that we do, because that retail component is in the overall project, right? So Crescent or Ram or whoever is probably doing that. So what we do specific to retail is kind of different from the retail of Camp North End or something like that.
Is there more, like you were saying about the city and stuff like, is there more like city involvement with those Camp North End projects and stuff like that? Like, do they have more of a say, I guess, because like they're giving you funding or tax incentives, like compared to the stuff you do, or like is the city just involved in everything and you just have to deal with it?
The city, the latter times 10 underline bullet point. I hope nobody from any jurisdiction listens to this, but no,
we can clip whatever out if we need to.
No, they love those projects. So as far as the Camp North Ends of the world, there are a myriad of tax incentives and historic tax credits, and I remember I'm from Columbia. I started my career in Columbia, and they were doing. It was called the Bailey Bill Tax Act or something. And if you retrofitted a historic building, I think you got like your property taxes cut in half for like the first 5-10 years of ownership of the building. So they love that stuff, right? Huge, yeah. So the city enjoys that. Now, whether they say, they always have their hands on something. So whether it's parking or layout or this and that, but they do like those kind of projects. As far as the overall ground up development, I think it's gotten a lot more tough. You got somebody in the planning department at the local municipality that, rides her bike to work every day and wants you to put a bike lane or a sidewalk and a bike rack out front, and it's like, as a developer, that's just adding to my performa in our project.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never forget, one of the first deals I did was a Popeyes in Richmond, Virginia. And, Popeyes has that, New Orleans look with the lights that overlay on the side or whatnot. There was one that was coming. It had a light in the drive-thru, so the windshield of the car in the drive-thru would be at this light. The city had us go to the manufacturer of the light and get a photometric study done because she thought that the light was going to be too bright through the drive-thru. What? And we had to go back through, some of these plans and some of this. It's crazy what, and Paul alluded to this earlier. We did O'Reilly's Auto Parts here on South Tryon, and somebody was talking about our fire hydrant, what we're going to do in case of emergency, so on and so forth. And it was an out parcel to a shopping center, and I said, well, there's a fire hydrant on right here. And they made me go get an easement from the shopping center owner. Mind you, this fire hydrant is from here to where I parked in the parking lot from our building, to go get an easement from the guy to be able to use his fire hydrant. So long and short, that shopping center owner said, sure, I will. And so next thing you know, 10 grand or whatever it was later, he signed his easement and went on down the road. And, but my comment is like, so you're telling me that if this O'Reilly's were to burn, you're going to stand next to this fire hydrant 20 feet away.
Can't use it.
Can't use it because we don't have an easement. Like, some things are just, and there's a laundry list of things that people battle through planning and zoning. And, it goes back to the time, too. Like, a lot of what we do is ground up development. Mm-hmm. So to your point about timing on due diligence, when we go in for permitting or what have you, every little change, a lot of times you get booted back in line. So let's say, our civil architect, we go in and somebody says, well, a lot of municipalities have a dumpster pad. So where the dumpster of the, O'Reilly's or whatever it is, it's facing the road too much. We don't want people to see the dumpster, move the dumpster over here kind of thing. Well, now we got to go back to civil, redraw it, get back in line. Then it's another 30, 45 days before they review it. And then if somebody else has another comment, then it's back. And so, it can just take, and it's difficult in my world, kind of preaching, if you will, to these brokers. You come at them with this long due diligence and they're like, whoa, this takes forever. And it's like, it honestly and truly does. And if you have to rezone something, if I find a site for somebody and I got to drive through and then I got to rezone it or get a variance for a drive through or something, you got to go meet with the town and, council or whatever it is, Board of Zoning Appeals, and go through this whole process before you even get your deal. So it's a long process. So
who on that whole due diligence piece, like you're talking about all the things you guys got to do, who puts that money up? Because that sounds like a lot of money you're spending before you even decide, you're trying to figure out, are we buying this or not? You're putting a lot of money into it, decide whether you might get to the point, yeah, we're not buying it now.
Right.
Who's putting up that money? Is it you guys as the developers?
Yeah. So in our world, they essentially call it pursuit cost. Okay. So cost to pursue the project. And again, it's all just kind of a betting game. If I have a long due diligence, something crazy, 240 days for, money doesn't go hard until after 240 days, then I'm going to try and work my lease out before I do anything. Because if I go start spending phase one geotech, 50 grand on drawings, so on and so forth, and then the guy decides he doesn't want to sign a lease, then you're screwed. Yeah. So a lot of times we like to, tee up the lease, get the lease done, and then start really spending money. But sometimes you don't really have that time. Yeah. You almost got to run them parallel. But the way that we look at it, it's the development business is risk reward, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, whereas you may spend 10, 15 grand on phase one geotech survey, so on and so forth, it's a lot better than having to close on a deal $1 million and you're sitting there. So, you know, and we may do another deal down the road and pick it back up. I mean, cost of doing business, I guess, is really like
we hear a lot of like interest rates. Does that really affect you guys?
oh yeah.
Tell me more.
So, interest rates in our world, I guess, is correlated with cap rates. So, a lot of guys going back, you guys probably know more than me, 2, 3, I guess almost 3 years ago now, when interest was 2.5%, 3%.
Giving money away at that point.
Right, exactly. So, the easiest way to explain this. So, Starbucks, for instance, let's say you're an investment broker, you bring my Starbucks out to market. Those things, because the cost of money was so cheap, the cap rates on those went very low. So, a 20-year Starbucks, brand new Starbucks lease on the market may have been a 4 cap or a 4.5 cap on the exit. And so, usually guys in our business are 1.5, 2 point spread on basis points. So let's say, you know, you pull comps, I get a broker to say, you know, jump on CoStar, hey, what are the last 5 Starbucks that have sold? 4 cap, 4.25 cap, and 4.15. So I'm going to underwrite my deal 4.5 plus a 1.5. So call it 6 or 6.25 yield on cost, so total project cost with the rent that I'm getting, and that's my spread. So what happened was, when debt started creeping up, you're not going to buy something at 4.5% when the debt's up here now. But where guys got way ahead of their skis, what happened was, again, going back into the timeline of our projects, call it 2 years, sometimes even more. You know, you're sitting there, I call an investment broker, hey, I'm looking at doing this Starbucks deal. What are they trading for? Trading for 4.75. Okay, so I'm going to do my deal on, 6.5, 6.75 yield to cost. What happened was, nobody really knew what was coming. So here I go. I sign a lease with Starbucks. I'm legally bound to do this deal. And I'm halfway through due diligence. I'm $100,000 in soft costs or pursuit costs. And I see interest rates start creeping up. And then next thing you know, within 18 months, maybe even less, that Starbucks went from, the comparable sales went from 4.5 to 6%. And then what happens is now you delivered a Starbucks that you underwrote at 6.5 yield on cost. You're going to sell it for a 6. Oh, by the way, you got to pay your broker. Oh, by the way, you got to pay your equity that gave you the money to do the deal. And you're kind of
Probably
screwed.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of, it's happening every day in our business right now. People
so are
are
you
essentially
adding
going
like
under.
a buffer now?
Oh, now we are, certainly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But there's, last 18 months, plus or minus 2 years, maybe. Guys were just like breaking even, some getting, bringing money to the closing table. You don't want to be stuck with a lot of our deals are plus or minus $3 million. I'd rather break even instead of be stuck with this thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of them were, and if you didn't have, if you didn't have cash reserves or whatever, getting into like running a business, but you're upside down.
Yeah.
So I talked to a broker the other day, one of his biggest clients, he said he called on and he's like, oh, I haven't talked to you in a while. I'm doing construction now. So it put a lot of guys kind of upside down.
Yeah.
But yes, to your point, now instead of underwriting stuff going in at 7.5 cap, now we're like 8, 8.5, 9. Most things move like 1.5 to 2 points. And what really got hit, this is kind of another note, is the franchisee stuff. So when investors buy our stuff, they want credit, right? So you got $3 million, 1031 exchange, and are you going to buy a corporate guaranteed Starbucks deal or a franchisee? He just built his first unit of Popeyes and he's worth $500,000. You're going to buy them, right? So what happened was, when money was so cheap, all of this was, all the corporate stuff was taken. So even the franchisee stuff was selling for like close to what the corporate deals were. I mean, it was wild.
Higher risk stuff. It was saying. So higher risk stuff was selling for stuff it shouldn't be because it didn't have any.
Exactly, because they had to do a deal. I mean, 1031, you got a specific amount of time, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's like 6 months, right, to identify.
But what happened is interest rates started creeping. Guys started kind of holding on to their money and not so less buyers, and then they were just buying the corporate stuff. So the franchisee stuff was just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. So that stuff is kind of struggling right now. So we've kind of moved more into a lot of our focus, like the corporate side of things, chasing more corporate tenants versus franchise tenants. Because again, we're using other people's capital.
Yeah.
So, and it's just like the bank, I'm paying a percentage for that capital.
Yep.
So the longer that sits on the market, it just eats it, the income that we get from, call it the GP side or whatever. Because again, if it sits for 6 months and I'm paying X percent on a return to an investor, but I projected that it was going to sell right when the paint was drying, that's 6 months of $2 million at 8 or 10%. That's just taken off the bottom line.
Yeah.
So the longer it sits there, anyways, that's probably.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to circle back on the break-even part. Something that I want people to understand is like when you say break-even, you're saying someone could work on a deal for 2 years, and the break-even is they didn't technically make $1, so they didn't get technically paid for all this work they did for 2 years. All they did was just get out of the deal.
You're talking to somebody that's happened multiple times.
How do you supplement that? Like, how do you keep going? Like, a few questions around this.
Yep.
One, how do you mentally stay in the game? I know you like it a lot, but these deter people. It's like a couple times this happens. Like I've seen it in residential. Where bad deals go bad, people get out of the industry completely. How do you stay in this? But also, how do you pay your bills during that time? Like, what are you doing to provide income? Are you working at Chick-fil-A? What's going on?
I need to. No. So going back, I think there was a couple questions there. How do I stay in it? I love the chase of the deal.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's always been my strong suit. It's just finding the next. Let's go. Let's find the next one. Drumming up deals, so on and so forth. So I almost couldn't get out of it. You know? I mean,
you're addicted. You might say.
Yeah, they're addicted.
Yeah.
There you go. But there are a ton of people that got out of it. I mean, I think there was, a year or so ago, I mean, even your larger commercial brokerage firms, your JLL, CBREs of the world, they were down 60, 70% as a firm. And it was tough. And I think a lot of people, some people got out of what I do and went to go take a corporate real estate job, which in our business, a corporate real estate job would to go be the director of real estate for Bojangles or something, like a salary, guys that I would send deals to approve, if you will. I think a lot of guys did that. But there's a couple other queses.
There's tons of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one was how do you stay motivated, right? It was a big thing.
Yeah.
But also how do you make money during this time? Because if yours always is on the back end, right? You don't get paid till then. How are you paying your mortgage? I hate to get into your personal finances to
how many deals are you juggling at once?
Yeah,
it's probably not just one going on at a time.
And I think about the bigger question is if someone's trying to get into what you're doing. Obviously, you've been doing this a while. You've seen all the different stuff, and you're still constantly learning. But if I was going to get into what you were doing, how does that look like? Where do I need to prep myself mentally for? When people get into residential, I prep them heavily on okay. You make sure you have 6 months of salary minimum because you're probably not going to do a deal.
Yep.
There is the very few people that get into it and hit the home runs, right? But there's a lot of background stuff that had happened to make that worth it. But if you were going to give someone advice on that, getting into it, how are you going to tell me all right, how are you going to make money in these first 2 years? Because you're not doing it on the deal, right? What you're saying is making it on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been in it long enough where there's a nest egg. I'm not in the city. You got a landlord and a tenant, and then on the dispo side, the capital market side, you have, people that sell investment type stuff. So I think if I were to do it all again, I would probably get into the capital markets end of things.
Okay.
I think a lot of the brokerage shops you go to, you're just kind of, all you're really learning is like contracts, leases, showing stuff. You're not really, if your overall goal is development, you're not really learning the ins and outs of the numbers and the underwriting and the why, if you will, which was kind of hard for me, right? Like I don't even know if I knew what pro forma meant when I first got in it because I was just showing industrial warehouses, So, but on the capital markets side, CBRE has a capital markets team, Berkeley here in town, whoever. That's way more in tune on the numbers, the returns, the IRRs, the underwriting, the why. Like, why is somebody going to buy this? Why did somebody do this deal? So on and so forth. So in a lot of those teams, I don't know how it works in the residential world. A lot of it's like a tiered system. So, hey, give me 50 grand base or whatever, but I'll split with the shop like 80-20 to the shop, or a draw, or like something of that nature. Because we all know starting out full 1099's not fun,
it's
right?
Tough. Yeah, it's tough, especially being young and not understanding it.
Yeah, so I think if I were to do it over again, I would go try to get into capital markets, and this is if I knew my long-term was development. Get into some sort of capital markets. Because they're also selling our assets, so I talk to them daily. So developers, you kind of get in the weeds with them. You know why their numbers. You look over leases. Why does this lease say X, Y, Z? This rent has this annual bump, and putting together tables. Anyways, and I would be willing to give up more of a fee to have probably a base just to get going, or B, like the knowledge. So, I tell people all the time, some of these guys, there's a story. When I was just getting started out, and one of the senior guys came to me and said, hey, let's team up, let's work together. We're going to start off with this split, which was awful. And it kind of, went up, just like you guys probably, you hit X amount of commissions, your percentage of the shop goes up, and blah, 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 blah. Well, it was great until he got this breakdown from, some massive producing industrial broker in Atlanta that makes well over 7 figures a year. And the junior broker, if the senior broker is making $1 million and you agree to a 90-10 split, that's great, because here you are still 20 years old, whatever, making 100 grand. But if you agree to that split and the senior broker is making 300 grand and you're sitting there, that's a whole different story, right? So my point being is I would be, if I were to go back into it, I would definitely give up more of a fee to learn more. And like a lot of these, I'm not going to name any names, but coming out of school, I called on one of the bigger firms here. Yeah, sure, we'll bring you on. And it was more or less of we'll give you a phone and a phone book and tell you to have fun. And I'm like, that's doing nothing for me, right?
Learning,
right?
Nothing.
Whereas, hey, you give me 50 grand a year to pay my rent in South End, but you meet with me one-on-one and I come on site tours with you and I do this and that. It's definitely more of a learning experience.
Yeah, so you're paying for it, right? That's the thing. But you're getting your value out of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Something I want to touch base on. You mentioned capital markets a couple times. I think a lot of people won't know what that actually means. Like, when you say capital markets, what do you actually mean? Like, what does that pertain? So
capital markets basically just means investments. I guess is the easiest way to put it.
Sectors, like asset classes and stuff like that.
Yeah. So just for example, so let's take the main asset classes in commercial, we call it land, office, multifamily, industrial, retail. Some people take land out of there, but anyways, each asset class, you have a specific broker, and each of them have, so let's take just office. So, and some people are generalists, some people just do office brokerage, but a lot of the bigger firms, they have an office tenant rep team. So that team is representing a law firm that is looking for space in Uptown. They have a landlord team, so they represent the owner of this building. They'll lease it out. And they have a capital markets team. Capital markets basically is, if something is a stabilized asset, let's say this building's 100% leased, they sell it to a REIT or an investor, for a return, really. So it's kind of the different brokerage breakouts, if you will. I mean, so yeah, like our world, retail. So there's like bunch of brokers involved, right? So there's a broker helping us buy the dirt. There's a retail tenant rep broker who's negotiating the lease with me, between me and Outback. Sometimes there's a landlord broker helping me negotiate that. And then once it's a 100% lease stabilized asset and we go sell it as an investment on the market, there's a capital markets or investment broker on the back end.
There's a lot of hands.
So of course.
A lot of hands in the pot, essentially, it sounds like.
Lots of fees.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's why commercial is a lot of money, right? Speaking of that, how do you, like, if someone came to you and they're like, hey, I want to be in real estate. I'm not sure where I want to go and do, like, I'm trying to figure out between residential and commercial. Like, obviously you're in commercial 100%, you've never been in residential, but, like, what advice are you giving them, like, how do they can choose? Because, like, you're not going to pick for them, right? You're just going to give them, like, here's what it is, and then you can choose. Like, what are you saying to them? Like, here's why, if you want to get in commercial, this is why you would get into it.
Yeah. I think to get into commercial, for I guess a few things. One is the learning curve. Again, going back to, you learn so much that's involved with the development process, the why, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, and again, I may be way wrong. Don't jump across the table. But when you guys are, showing the house, you're not like, you don't care why something that the builder did weird, or why he permitted his sidewalk, or you're not really thinking like that from a broker mentality, but from a development mentality, you're there's a lot more why, I guess, it goes into.
You're just looking at things differently. Sounds like,
and that's another part of that question that I forget.
Yeah, just I think that how you would tell someone, like, if they're trying to decide between the two, right? They know they want to be in real estate, but, like, they're not really sure which way they want to go.
Yeah.
And I've met a lot of brokers that are residential. I've met a lot of brokers that do both, and I've met brokers that just do commercial, right?
Yeah.
And there's commonalities. Like, you start to talk to them and notice that. And you're like, okay, this, I think now doing residential, as long as I have, and jumping into commercial, I can see what personality traits make you very successful in different ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're an analytical guy in regards, like, you're looking at the numbers, but you're also a social guy where you're out there talking to people, right? Like, that's a big thing. Where I think in residential, you need to be social. Like, you're never going to be successful if you're not branding yourself, right? We talk about social media and all this other stuff, but that's not that big in commercial. So you don't need to be that influencer type to be successful in commercial.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of guys that make a lot of money that can work an Excel sheet that'll make you go blind, but they can't find a deal to save their lives. So, and I think if I were to tell somebody, it'd probably be commercial, just because we all know a lot of the fees are bigger, a lot of the chase is bigger. I think find an asset class to specialize in. I started off as a generalist, and next thing you know, you're over here showing this retail space, and oh wait, I need to be doing industrial, and you find yourself not mastering one asset class, if you will. So, and there's some generalists that make a ton of money, but there's also people who make a lot more money. They're multifamily capital markets brokers, and they've found that niche.
You probably have to try a little bit of all of them, and then it's like, oh wait, I like this one a little bit more than all the other ones. Let me go down this road.
Right, and I think it's too knowing the state of the market, if you will. Right, so we all know what's happening to office right now. I mean, it's COVID, terrible. I mean, half of the buildings in Uptown are 80% vacant and bankrupt now. So. And, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. A lot of big box, if you will, like shopping center, real estate, retail guys. The market's kind of trend. Some people say it's back, it's fine. But what I'm getting at is I left industrial right around the time that e-commerce, everybody's ordering on their phone. The industrial sector for the last 5-10 years has been on fire. So, knowing what I know now, I'm like, maybe I should have done the
Well, hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah, right.
Do you see it ebb and flow though with any of these asset classes? Because like you talked about the office thing, and it was interesting because I was reading an article the other day that office has been down for a while, but it's starting to come back. You're starting to see because a lot of these companies are starting to make their people come back.
Yeah.
But to your point also about Uptown, you're seeing a lot of those because those leases come up. They were high rents, right? But they didn't have a ton of amenities or they didn't update the building. So you're seeing
Right.
like people going to these South End buildings because they're brand new. They pay the same rent, but they get all these other amenities. So they're like, well, I'll just lease here instead. So you're seeing vacancy there, but you're seeing it getting in new development. You know, so I guess at that point, it's like is that kind of normal for commercial to see ebb and flows like that, or is there a point where like, hey, office is dead or retail's dead or something like that?
You know, I think that's a big debate, I guess, in our world right now about office. Office is like the one you see on CNBC that's like represented on how bad the real estate market. You know, it's like the overall arching commercial real estate is bad. Office is terrible. Well, it's just office.
Yeah.
Does it ebb and flow? I don't know because I've never been through another COVID, right?
Yeah.
So I will say there's a lot of guys that are getting really creative on reusing. Like I know the Asana Partners guys are redoing one of the buildings in Uptown to to a multifamily deal. Whether it's like a conversion like that, you know, I think it would be cool for the city to somehow get involved in, you know, converting some of those into workforce housing. You know, you hear so much about the cost of living here and we need more workforce housing. I think that would be cool. But does it ebb and flow? I don't know. I don't. I mean, I would assume so. But again, this is the first kind of wild interest rate deal or COVID that I've ever been through, right? I mean, again, I was in high school during 2008, and so this whole interest rate thing, I thought I was living on the moon doing deals 2 or 3 years ago, and then it's screwed. So,
well, then October 2023 happens, and it's the highest rates we've seen in 20 years.
Exactly.
Right? Which I'd like to preface that is actually not that high of a rate, but comparative to people digesting 2.5-3% thinking that's normal. 8% isn't. It is higher, but it's not the highest we've ever seen. I mean, in the 90s and early 80s, we were seeing 17%, 18%, and I can't even imagine commercial real estate at that point because those cap rates must have been totally
ridiculous.
Different.
Yeah,
Right?
I laugh. My dad, you know, going through all this, and he was like, "Well, son, my first car, I think I was at 20%. These interest rates are still low." And I'm like, "No, they're not."
Yeah, they're not low.
Because I didn't know, right? I mean,
sign me up.
Yeah, right. So I bought my first house when interest rates were low.
Yeah.
Probably my first car when interest rates were low. So I didn't, you know.
Yeah.
I thought that was normal. So, anyways.
Yeah. No, that's
Before we kind of wrap up, as you're kind of talking through it, I love what you said. That's a nice piece of dirt.
Yeah.
Like, I just imagine you just cruising around, just like scoping out all this dirt and just pulling off. And
your cat calling dirt.
Yeah, my wife, she does not like, you know, we'll go on road trips or something. I'm like in the right lane, and I'm like, what are you doing? You know, if we can reuse a building. You know, I was just involved with a deal in Greenville. There was an old Arby's that we retrofitted. So a lot of deals getting done like that. But yeah, you can, you know, I love a nice piece of dirt or a building.
Yeah.
So.
Well, cool, man. So tell the people, where can they find out more about you, the company, and kind of what you're up to?
Yeah. So, Elmwood Property Group. So we obviously single-tenant net lease developers, kind of all throughout the Southeast, and we started that I guess February I did with myself and my partner Bowen Herger, who was at Diversified Development, the group in Columbia. And Bowen's a rock star. You know, I mean, I love chasing deals, but there's 1,000 more things involved through that process, and he is very good at that. And so, anywho, how can you find us? So we're still working on, you know, website and all that, getting up and going. But I'm on LinkedIn. Josh Speed it's my wife laughs. I always say like speed limit. So yeah, add me and feel free to reach out. I would love to look at sites or anything. Anybody out there has me
got a nice
look
piece of
at.
dirt?
If you got a nice piece of
If
dirt,
you-
call Josh speed.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
speeding that way.
Yeah, if you got a nice piece of dirt, I'm in the car. I'm heading there. So, but yeah, really just LinkedIn right now. But hopefully more to come. Hopefully, this thing gets going and really turns around with rates hopefully coming down. And yeah, right. So,
Sweet.
Yeah.
but I appreciate you guys' time today.
Yeah,
for
no, thanks
joining,
for
man.
coming. Man.
Yeah, hopefully it was all right, and I didn't tell too many secrets.
Oh.
No, we didn't give away the secret sauce. Don't worry.
Well, good deal.
Awesome. Man.
Cool, man.
Perfect. Cool. That's good.
Thank you.
Yeah. No,